Good morning, everybody. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, so please be seated so we can proceed with the opening session of the 10th edition of the DG Forum. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this 10th edition of the DG Forum, co-organized by the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, the Japan International Cooperation Agency, and the Islamic Development Bank. And this edition of the DG Forum is of special significance because it's taking place within the framework of the preparation of the Buenos Aires Conference on South-South Cooperation next year, and also because it's taking place in New York, where the political process is taking place. And you may know that here in New York, it's the place also of the politics of everything. And this reminds me of another concept, which is the Internet of everything. So it's indeed, the idea is to connect the practitioners of South-South and triangular cooperation to the political process. So now I have the great pleasure to introduce you to our distinguished speakers in the opening session of this DG Forum. First, we'll have Mr. Jorge Chediek, Director of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation and Envoy of the Secretary General on South-South Cooperation, who will deliver welcoming remarks, and then we'll have opening statement from our partners, JICA and the Islamic Development Bank. So now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Chediek. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Tariq. Good morning. The Expo has many purposes. The Expo has the purpose of showcasing what South-South cooperation is doing, how it is changing the world. And in these 10 years, we have significant experiences. And it's really showing through the exhibits that organizations, countries, private sector, and other partners put in place that South-South cooperation is really changing the world. But every Expo for the last 10 years has had this forum, the Director General Forum. And I want to take the opportunity to especially thank the government of Japan in the person of Mr. Takao Shimokawa, who is the JICA representative in New York. For the last 10 years, Japan has supported the organization of the Director General Forum. And this year, the Islamic Development Bank joined in the support, and I want to thank Dr. Abdel Hakim El Waer, advisor to the President of the Islamic Development Bank, for your support. We hope that next year we'll have more partners here supporting the expansion further of the Director General Forum, because this part of the event is an opportunity to build a stronger institutional network, to go from the knowledge and the interconnection of practices to establishing stronger mechanisms at the government level, at the level of international organizations that are also participating in the event, to support having more and better South-South cooperation. And as Tariq mentioned, this is very important because we are having this DG Forum on the eve of the beginning of the discussions of the outcome document of the Buenos Aires Plus 40 conference. And there are many challenges to that process. As Tariq mentioned, here in New York, everything becomes very complex, and the dynamics are sometimes dictated by other processes or by previous experiences. And we feel that this DG Forum will be an excellent opportunity for interaction between capitals and the New York negotiators, so we can have an outcome document that results in more and better South-South and triangular cooperation. And also triangular cooperation, among other things, becoming a more prominent feature of the global architecture of South-South cooperation. And that's why we're very happy to have partners that are models of triangular cooperation. Japan probably the founding country that implemented South-South cooperation in its cooperation programs, and the Islamic Development Bank with a very innovative modality that was presented and will be further discussed, the reverse linkages modality. So I wanted to welcome you, and we will participate actively in the deliberations, taking notes and listening to you. My office has the mission to be the secretariat and supporting the member states in the BAPA plus 40 process. And we look forward to your ideas, your proposals, and your suggestions to improve the work of the institutional architecture you represent, and also how that can be reflected in the outcome document of the Buenos Aires Plus 40 conference. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for our partners, for the confidence and the engagement. Thank to all of you that after 2 days you are still with the energy, and I'm sure you'll show it during the day, to engage in this particular discussion. And see you at the end of the event myself, to see and to listen from you how we can help all of you in your work of building more South-South and triangular cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shediak, for the welcoming remarks. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Takao Shimukawa, Chief Representative of JICA in United States of America office. Mr. Shimukawa, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It is a great honor to have the opportunity to make opening remarks on behalf of JICA at the Forum 2018. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the United Nations for kindly hosting the annual South-South Development Expo. As has been said, that this DG Forum has been an integral part of the Expo since its first meeting in 2008, and this year celebrating the 10 years anniversary. In this regard, I am very most grateful to our co-organizer UNOSCC, SC, and Islamic Development Bank. In March next year, BAPA Plus 40 will be held in Buenos Aires. It will be the most important conference for the South-South and Triangular Cooperation, marking the 40th anniversary of the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan for Action for promoting and implementing technical cooperation among developing countries, known as BAPA. In order to contribute to the upcoming conference, we set the theme of this year's forum as Towards the BAPA Plus 40, the role of practitioners in scaling up the impact of South-South and triangular cooperation for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As you know, the BAPA was adopted exactly 40 years ago in 1978. Now, the world is very different, and we are seeing the importance and value of South-South cooperation more than ever before. The adoption of Agenda 2030 gives us an opportunity to renew and reconsider the value, potential, and important roles of the South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation have on addressing the variety of development challenges we face. The SDGs cannot be achieved without the effective facilitation of the South-South cooperation and the triangular cooperation. The realization by the world with the concept of leave no one behind requires global partnership, resource mobilization, and technical expertise at the country, region, and the international level to address broad social, economic, and environmental issues. Japan started the development cooperation by joining the Colombo Plan in 1954, when Japan was still a major recipient foreign assistance. That cooperation was later described as South-South cooperation. Also, in 1975, JICA conducted its first triangular cooperation in Thailand. Based on our experiences, we feel strongly of the importance of the South-South cooperation, and we are committed to achieve supporting it to this day. In fiscal year 2017, about 300,000 people participated in JICA's third country training program in over 100 countries, and the 65 experts were dispatched throughout our third country expert dispatch program. JICA also participated in various important meetings on South-South and Triangle cooperation in past 12 months. Particularly, I'd like to congratulate the Thailand International Development Agency, TICA, and the UN ESCAP for co-hosting the inaugural Regional DG Forum for the Asia-Pacific in June this year. JICA has been leading the Global Partnership Initiative on Effective Triangle Cooperation together with Canada, Mexico, UNOSSC, IDB, OECD, and the Ibero-American Program for strengthening of South-South cooperation. Let me also briefly highlight some of our most recent triangular cooperation activities across the world. In partnership with Argentina, JICA is conducting what we call the Kaizen Tango to enhance the competitiveness of private companies, not only in Argentina, but also rest of the world. Throughout the use of Kaizen, a Japanese business philosophy of continuous improvement of working practices, JICA and Argentina have worked together to improve product knowledge and the productivity of companies across many regions. JICA is also working with Indonesia to scale up the use of maternal and child healthcare handbook to new 14 countries by drawing upon Indonesia's experience of distributing handbooks to more than 300 ethnic groups and many island inhabitants. JICA has also partnered with Turkey to tackle gender inequality in Afghanistan by conducting training for Afghan female police officers in Turkey. With Zambia, another example, JICA is collaborating with Zambia's National Science Center to scale up its successful lesson study model that provides continuous improvement of education quality so it can be used by other African countries. Most important conference, referring to this example, there are at least 3 ways in which South-South and triangular cooperation have important role in implementing SDGs. First, they encourage knowledge sharing and the creation of space for mutual learning and co-creation towards innovative solutions. Secondly, they facilitate the mobilization of resources and expertise from around the world to address common challenges. Third, they also contribute to mutual trust and understanding among countries, which I believe is a fundamental component of a global partnership and peace. However, to maximize the impact of South-South and triangular cooperation, we still need to make improvements. I'd like to start by pointing out 3 challenges that must be addressed to improve our outcomes. First, we must not forget the beneficiary country should take the driver's seat, and the cooperation should be demand-driven, which is a very important principle for foundation of effective cooperation. Secondly, it should be result-oriented so as to improve the cooperation's impact on SDGs. In order to improve the impact on effectiveness of our cooperation, sharing of best practices through common reporting or standardized evaluation framework would help all the stakeholders. Lastly, we should explore various methods to scale up the impacts of cooperation. For example, we could explore the more options to build centers of excellence in designated regions, or on specific issues, establish regional coordination mechanisms to better match demand and supply, and build capacity of development cooperation agencies. I hope these 3 ideas for improvement will serve to enrich today's discussion, and I will look forward to having a candid discussions with all practitioners of South-South cooperation on this forum. Finally, one of our core values of South-South cooperation is to provide mutual learning. It is my sincere hope and belief that this forum would provide an opportunity to learn from one another. I also strongly hope that we will be able to co-create using each other's own experiences to provide useful inputs towards the BAPA 40 Plus conference. In conclusion, I'd like to reiterate Japan's strong commitment to work together with partners, countries through South-South and triangular cooperation to tackle our world's development challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shimokawa, for this opening remarks. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Dr. Abdel Hakim Al-Wa'ir, Advisor to the President on Global Advocacy and Spokesperson, President's Office of the Islamic Development Bank. So, Dr. Al-Wa'ir, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and peace be upon all of you. Let me start by thanking Mr. George at the United Nations South-South Cooperation Office and JICA for allowing the Islamic Development Bank to join them in this great partnership and bringing everybody together on this very noble mission. I would like also to take the opportunity to convey the deep regards and wishes from the President of the Islamic Development Bank Group, Dr. Band Hajjah, for this forum and the Expo for the success. Allow me please to go back a bit in the history for about 45 years when the Islamic Development Bank was established. And we can see today among the known multilateral development banks, including the World Bank, African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, Inter-American, EBRD, EIB, we are the only one standing as a pure South-South cooperation institution at the moment. It is the model for South-South cooperation where, in fact, the whole Islamic Development Bank is based on that principle. The capital comes from countries of the South to help and support countries of the South. We have developed everything around the operations and modus operandi of the Islamic Development Bank to allow flow of knowledge, expertise. Today we're talking about flow of capitals among the different and various member countries. Today our member countries expand to 57 member countries. It is among the MDBs the second largest development bank in terms of membership of countries after the World Bank. Similarly, the OIC is the largest after the UN. But what is more important and unique is the diversity geographically among the continents. We cover 4 continents in the world. So we go all the way from Brunei, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Far East to Suriname and Guyana in Latin America today. And we cover all the Middle East, as well as a major part of Africa and Asia. And that gives us also an excellent platform and a forum to gather different knowledge from different countries and be able to pass it on easily. We also have been working very closely on trade facilitation and regional integration. It's one of our high priority, which basically encourages South-South cooperation among the member countries. And we look at deep as a development institution. By nature, we are not a policy formulation institution. So we look for practical development solutions by financing proper actions towards smooth flow of goods, services, and also citizens among the borders of the member countries. Newly developed, the President 5-year plan with the newly joining President to the bank is focusing more on transforming the bank from an institution for development to institution for development and developers. And by that we mean we're bringing all the partners in focusing more on a value chain-based projects and interventions. So now we look at how do we intervene in our member countries more on building value chains. And by value chains, we look at them as a real means to bring in more and strengthen South-South cooperations. So by building regional and merging into global value chains, we see how the comparative advantage of our member countries can take place in the global economy and also build around the region for a better strengthening of the cooperation among the member countries. Of course, we know that the second wave of value chain that is coming today is more on decentralizing products or added value activities towards better achievements and better integration of the global value chains. And we are very much prioritizing our projects and programs towards that. I've mentioned the areas of focusing on regional integration. The bank is actually in the final stage of establishing its new regional cooperation integration strategy, which is purely a South-South cooperation model that allow our 57 member countries to interact economically better among each other, either at the sub-regional level or the region-wide level. We have, I would mention specifically a new initiative that the bank is working very heavily on. We call it the Rice Initiative, and it is an integrated initiative for promoting rice production in 10 member countries in Africa. And that would allow the member countries to enhance the yield in terms of quality and quantity, as well as the benefit and the gain for the small farmers. And that is just one model of a number of models that we are embarking on. George has mentioned, and I'm sure many of you have heard of the reverse linkage initiative that the IDB has been running for quite some time now, and it is an effective model of transferring know-how from one country to another. I'm sure the colleagues have shared in different forums the models of how Indonesian expertise has helped Nigeria and Suriname on rice production. We've had expertise from Indonesia helping Dakar in Senegal for flood management and control, and that all to us lies under the high priorities of how South-South cooperation can really bring solutions and allow member countries to overcome the challenges of development they face today. We all believe the Papa plus 40 preparations, including this DG forum, with high-level representatives from many countries of the South, comes at a very important and critical time as we're heading towards March 2019, and it provides for us an important platform to take stock of the achievements of the South-South and triangular cooperation so far. Of course, we can share lessons through this forum, but more important, trying to find solutions to today's challenges. In this regard, I would like to share some of the thoughts for us to keep in mind during our deliberations today. The significance of South-South and triangular cooperation has been increasing, especially over the past decade, with increased financial and technical resources being devoted to this partnership framework by different actors. The great diversity and variety of the actors involved in the South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation in different levels possess many advantages as well as challenges, of course. One of the main advantages is the marketplace of know-how and expertise, technology and resources is very vast, so there are a lot of options to choose from. But among the challenges that we face today is the need for the establishment of an integrated ecosystem on structure and engagement of the South-South cooperation. We wanted to see a more institutionalized way among the member countries of how South-South cooperation is conducted at national level. We also wanted to see the effectiveness and efficiency and comprehensiveness of collaboration mechanisms for South-South cooperation that supports the achievement of sustainable development results, as well as the objective monitoring, assessment, and reporting frameworks on South-South cooperation. We know that every institutions and organizations and groupings might have their own ways of tackling these challenges, but I think forums like this is where we come and talk together and try to find a solution that we can collectively work together to achieve the demand and the need for our member countries and member states towards a better South-South cooperation. We therefore believe that while it may not be possible to harmonize all aspects that we have of South-South cooperation, an acceptable level of agreement is necessary on general institutional framework that clearly outlines the international architecture of South-South cooperation and how countries of the South and are connected to this framework at the national level. So with that, with these thoughts in general, I would like to thank you all, thank the South-South Cooperation Office at the UN and JICA for this joint of forces, and wish you all the best for the deliberations of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Al-Wa'ar, for this opening remarks on behalf of the Islamic Development Bank. So Thank you very much, Dr. Al-Wa'ar, for this opening remarks. So we have come to the end of this opening session, so please remain seated, so we'll move immediately to our first session. And once again, I'd like to welcome you all to this DG forum. Thank you. So I'd like to invite the panelists for the first session to come to the podium so we can start our first session. Dr. Julius Muya from Kenya, Tariq Al-Ansari from Qatar, Mustafizur Rahman from Bangladesh, Noel Gonzalez from Mexico, and Federico Bonaglia from OECD Development Centers. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this first session on the topic of the institutionalization of South-South cooperation. And to discuss this issue, we have a very distinguished panelists. I'd like first to introduce them, and then I will go for just few to share with you some insight and ideas before giving the floor to our distinguished panelists, and then we'll open it to the floor. So in this panel, we have Dr. to my left, Dr. Julius Muya, Principal Secretary, State Department for Planning of Kenya. To my right, His Excellency, Mr. Tariq Al-Ansari, Director of International Cooperation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Qatar. Then we have Mr. Mustafizur Rahman, Additional Secretary, Government of Bangladesh and Project Director, Access to Information Program of Bangladesh. And then we have Mr. Noel Gonzalez Segura, Director General of Planning and International Development Cooperation Policies, AMEXID, Mexico. Last but not least, we have Mr. Federico Bonaglia, Deputy Director of OECD Development Center. So once again, thank you very much for your presence and participation. I'd like to share with you some of the ideas on relation with the institutionalization of South-South cooperation, as we are moving towards the preparation of the conference. Because South-South cooperation has really increased in a significant way in recent decades in terms of scope, scale, along with diversification of activities and also multiplication of its actors. So in this context, it really becomes critical to enhance the coordination, coherence of all actors and all activities in South-South cooperation. We know that so many countries have developed institutional arrangement to deal with and mechanism to deal with South-South cooperation. And they have also accumulated a lot of experience in this regard that could be shared with other countries. Institutionalization at the national, regional, and global levels of South-South triangular cooperation brings a lot of benefits. It systematizes the process of South-South cooperation. It facilitated the design of policies, their implementation, as well as the learning process from past activities through an evidence-based approach. It facilitates also the sharing of experiences and best practices, as well as the establishment and the implementation of partnerships. The strengthening of the institutional arrangement and frameworks of South-South and triangular cooperation will be one of the themes of the conference, as you may know. And the objective is to use the opportunity of the conference in order to explore ways in how to create an enabling environment, including institutional, legal, and policy, in the policy framework for the further promotion of South-South cooperation for sustainable development. I should highlight that there is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to the national arrangement for South-South cooperation. There is a diversity of effective approaches and mechanisms that could be adopted to manage South-South triangular cooperation at the national and the regional levels. And even in this session, we will be hearing from countries and other stakeholders that have developed or are in the process of developing different models of institutional arrangement. The objective of this exercise is to facilitate the sharing of experiences and mutual learning. I'd like also to highlight that the UN Office for South-South Cooperation is giving a high priority to this issue in order to develop the capacities of countries in order to implement, first to design policies, effective policies, and to implement them in an effective way. So without further ado, I'd like to now give the floor to our first panelist in this session, Dr. Julius Muya. Dr. Muya, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator. And I want to appreciate my fellow panelists and state a few things, all protocols observed. Well, Kenya has been institutionalizing the South-South cooperation for a long time, actually a long way back from our independence, 1963. And what we have done in this respect is to recognize the fact that there are changing dynamics in the world today with regard to demand for enlarged scope for collaboration beyond just technical cooperation to all aspects of development. For instance, aspects like exchange of knowledge and skills, promotion of science, technology, and innovation, promotion of trade and investment, and also having solidarity along many issues that affect our nations. But the challenge that we have as a country is that we've been operating without an adequate policy. We've been operating without adequate legal structure and also a proper institutional framework to manage our South-South cooperation. And so, in our view, this has resulted to less than adequate coordination of our South-South and triangular cooperation activities in Kenya because we have several institutions and agencies that participate in the process without a specific one being the one that is the focal point in a structured manner. But nevertheless, we recognize that South and triangular cooperation is very important. And so at the moment, it is the ministry that is in charge of the treasury and planning, which coordinates the activities of South and triangular cooperation. Well, some times back, we tried actually to come up with a South-South Technical Standing Committee in 2007, where we identified 15 ministries and agencies to be the ones that are represented in that Technical Standing Committee. But then, going down the line, we have also been able to do some work with that Technical Standing Committee, where we have been able to come up with a study which was called Assessing Options for the Creation of South Center by the government of Kenya, and that was 2009, which was actually very helpful. And so from that scoping study, I want to say that we were able to get the government to issue a gazette notice, which was actually what some other countries would call executive order in 2012, which created a South-South Center. We also identified office space, which was good. We identified the personnel to manage that office. And also, we were able to get a budget allocated by Treasury. But then, unfortunately, this center was degazetted in 2013, after 1 year. And that then brings the challenge of a proper legal institutional structure that I talked about earlier on. And so what we have done lately is that we have revisited the issue of strengthening the South-South cooperation, and I recently reconstituted the standing committee, and this has now a membership of 40 institutions, and this I did on 25th of September 2018. So this committee, at the time being, is drafting a roadmap so that we can use that roadmap to develop a policy which then will enable us to come up with a formal institutional and legal framework to support the management of South-South and triangular cooperation in Kenya. And so, looking forward, moderator, we are looking then to make sure that we strengthen our framework for South-South and triangular cooperation. And in this roadmap that we have mentioned, we are looking for intensive capacity development on management of South-South and triangular cooperation. We are also looking at developing a local database on centers of excellence and best practices solutions. That's next year. We're also looking to develop a policy for South cooperation by December 2020. And then we are also looking to establish a proper institution and center which has capacity to manage all our South and triangular cooperation, and this should be done by December 2020. And also we are looking to harmonize all South cooperation activities under one single institution. And we are also finally looking to have an act of parliament, if we can, to make sure that all this is grounded in law. So finally, we have mainstreamed our South cooperation and triangular activities in our medium-term planning framework. And moderator, I want to say that we really appreciate what the United Nations has done to publish Kenya's experience in social protection, and also we are in support of BAPA Plus 40 conference in March 2019. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muya, for sharing the experience of your country with regard to the institutional arrangement in dealing with South-South cooperation, but also emphasizing the challenges and for telling us how the idea of the necessity of putting in place an adequate and also strengthened institutional arrangement is really important for you in order to use South-South cooperation for the development of the country. Thank you very much for these important remarks. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to His Excellency Tariq Al-Ansari from Qatar. Tariq, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear friend Tariq, and good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with you to participate in this Director General's dialogue on South-South cooperation. and share some ideas, and I will try to focus on the national perspective a little bit, and then on the multilateral arena as well, including the United Nations from our national perspective as well. And in my opinion, at the beginning, if we want to talk about the institutional capacity of the South-South cooperation, we need to look back in all the terms of references and outcomes we have, starting from the genesis of the South-South cooperation in 1978. And also we need to depend on the outcomes of Buenos Aires back then, and passing through Nairobi outcome document in 2009, which commemorated the 30th anniversary of the establishment of South-South cooperation after Buenos Aires Declaration. Of course, you will see that there are many recommendations also in the outcome document of Nairobi talking about the institutional capacity of the South-South cooperation. And two major and important outcomes and recommendations that were thankfully implemented was the upgrading the unit of South-South cooperation and make it an office, and also nominating the director of South-South cooperation to special envoy of the Secretary General for South-South cooperation. And these were meant to boost and enhance the institutional capacity of the South-South cooperation in the UN system. Of course, there are many other related conferences and outcomes, although we may think that there are different agendas, the FFD or the South Summit's outcome. But if you look in the outcomes, you will see in every outcome a paragraph or two or more talking about South-South cooperation, the importance of South-South cooperation, how can we make South-South cooperation work and operationalize this agenda. And you can take a look at the first South Summit outcome of Havana, and then Doha outcome of 2004, and of course the coming conference that will be in Uganda, which will be the third South Summit, for sure also will focus on the importance of enhancing the institutional capacity of the South-South cooperation. And let's not forget also that the major conference, which will represent the 40th anniversary in Argentina, the 40th anniversary of establishing the South-South cooperation agenda, will also for sure have such call, including the very long-belated and waited recommendation regarding establishing an agency of South-South cooperation in one of the South nations that was mentioned in other outcomes before. Of course, on the regional arena, if you talk about the regional level, even if you go back to the Charter of the United Nations, it says very clearly that the regional arrangements are very important to complement the efforts of the United Nations when it comes to the maintenance of peace and security and also development. So it is very important also to enhance the South-South cooperation agenda and operationalize it and institutionalize this agenda when it comes to regional organizations and arrangements. But as my colleague from Kenya mentioned, we still need to enhance more this capacity in the regional dimension. Although I would like to recall that, for example, at regional level, there were movements and there are movements to move forward with the South agenda, including the South-South cooperation agenda. And for example, I recall here the Arab-China Dialogue Forum, which was held in the League of Arab States in Cairo in July 2018, this year, which also stated the importance of cooperation between the South countries and enhancing the capacities of the South countries to make South-South cooperation work, not to just leave it as a concept, but we need to operationalize it and make it work. At the same time, the first Arab regional South-South cooperation development Expo, which was held also in Doha in 2014, focused on this agenda and called for implementation and more institutionalization of this concept at the regional level. At national level in Qatar, of course, we consider the South-South cooperation agenda, and the South agenda is very close to our heart and strategic for us and represent important pillar of the soft power when it comes to economic empowerment in the South region. And Qatar presided the high-level UNGA committee on South-South cooperation for like 3 or 4 years between 2007 and 2010. And it coincided also with preparing for the Nairobi International High-Level Conference on South-South Cooperation that took place in 2009 in December. And as I said, 2 major important recommendations were to upgrade the institutional I'm sorry for my voice. The institutional capacity of the unit in the UN and convert it into an office, and also nominating the director as a special envoy. We did follow on that when Qatar presided the UNGA in the 66th session, and in 2012 in many letters that were exchanged between the PGA and the SG until this recommendation was implemented, because it represents an entitlement. Of course, it wasn't easy as well to come up and agree on the Nairobi outcome, because we know that the culture here in the UN, when it comes to economic and developmental issues, there will be always the G77 negotiating with the North countries. But thankfully, we could achieve it. And some countries really played an important role as a bridge. And I recall here Mexico, who played a very important role to save the negotiations, and in particular the gentleman on my right side. Oh. In 2009, after long negotiations, and then the UNGA, you can get all alone without me. So, on the other hand, it's important to adapt and promulgate the jurisdiction and the regulations and the laws at national level in order to focus on this agenda. For us as Qatar, although everybody knows we are not a member in the OECD organization as legally binding ODA provider, but we do provide big foreign aid every year. It's between $1.5 to $2 billion of ODA on voluntary basis, because we believe in the financing for development, and we believe in the South-South cooperation. And therefore, we have established important donor institutions as well, like, for example, the charity organizations and specialized agencies in the area of education and in the area of social work. I have with me here in my delegation people, individuals from Qatar Social Network, for example, and they do a lot of programs for capacity building and social development in other South nations. Charity also is not like 20 years ago. Maybe 20 years ago, charity was giving money to poor people in the street. But now, charity organizations and institutions became very sophisticated, and they do a lot of important work in providing foreign aid and to implement the political decision of the government. Because even if you have the money, the government cannot implement developmental and capacity building projects abroad. And therefore, the governments, and including my government, we count a lot on all these specialized agencies in order to implement the programs of capacity building and foreign aid abroad. We are trying to focus a lot within 50% at least of the foreign aid to make it focus on health, education, and economic empowerment. Health, SDG 3, education, which is SDG 4, and economic empowerment, in particular SDG 1 and SDG 8 as well. And we believe that this should also entail building the capacity of the receiving countries to make the support sustainable in order to implement and achieve SDGs 11 and 16 related to building peaceful and inclusive societies, which are also focus areas for our developmental policy. Of course, I can mention many examples of the capacity building activities that we do in the South nations. For example, Educate a Child initiative, which is focusing on educating 10 million students, and then Qatar initiative, which is called the Quest, that focuses on building the capacity of Syrian refugees. And the charity organizations have a policy to focus on making the support sustainable, and including, in particular, to build the capacity of the receiving countries. Triangular cooperation activities also that we do, we care very much about this agenda. And for example, we are doing this with France to support Tunis. The digitalization of education to build the capacity and institutionalization of education in receiving countries, and of course, I mean here the South countries, the countries of the South. And then, of course, we understand that this agenda is going to be recalled again in many further meetings. We are ready to support it and work with the colleagues here to achieve our goals in order to see South-South cooperation reality and to see it operationalized and institutionalized. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tariq, for really this important presentation on, and especially for sharing with us some important insight on what I said at the beginning of the politics of everything here in New York, about the political process for the strengthening of the institutional arrangement for South-South cooperation. And also, I know that you have been very involved personally, because your country chaired the high-level committee on South-South cooperation, and you have also hosted the South Summit, the last South Summit, and also for sharing some insight and ideas about the regional perspective in the Arab region, and also your national experience in supporting South-South cooperation. Thank you very much for that. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Mustafizur Rahman from Bangladesh. Mr. Rahman, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, respected moderator, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. Over the last decade, Bangladesh borrowed ideas from other countries, adapted them, and scaled up implementation to benefit millions of its citizens, particularly in the area of public service innovations. Turning all 5,000 of our local government offices at the grassroots level into one-stop services center, serving millions of underserved with critical public and private services. Each center features a unique public service partnership hosted in a government office but run by the local entrepreneurs to achieve financial sustainability. Secondly, all government agencies now complete to nurture a culture of innovation to become more citizen-friendly. The central driving force of this culture is increased empathy for citizens, and the primary measurement of change is reducing TCV. TCV for time, cost, and visit, the number of time, cost, and visit that citizens have to make to access public services. Thousands of civil servants have gone through empathy training. Thirdly, we have realized that digitizing our age-old service delivery process means amplifying their inherent inefficiencies. Why would we do that? Common sense has prevailed, and we have borrowed the corporate methodology to business process reengineering, renamed it to service process simplification, and ensure that all of our agencies now simplify before digitizing. The combination of one-stop digital centers, empathy training, service process simplification, and digitization have enabled citizens to save over 1.2 billion workdays, 500 million visits, and $3 billion in the last few years. In 2015, at the invitation of the government of the Maldives, Bangladesh began sharing its knowledge and insights to facilitate the adaptation of the digital centers model to the island country. And taking advantage of the UNDP Global Network, in 2017, UNDP Fiji requested our Bangladesh country office to share the A2I program's knowledge and insight to develop mobile one-stop shop on boats to make it more convenient for its island-dwelling citizens to access vital government information and services. Similar cooperation is also ongoing with the Bhutan, Philippines, Somalia, Peru, and Paraguay. The government of Bangladesh has established a South-South Cooperation Cell. The South-South Cooperation Cell is located in the Economic Relations Division of the Ministry of Finance and supported by the Prime Minister's Office. It provides the institutional mechanism to apply the above model for successfully importing and exporting useful knowledge and solutions through South-South cooperation. Building on the roles that the country has played both a knowledge importer and exporter, a builder of citizen-centered public service innovation capacity, and an enthusiastic champion of South-South cooperation, the South-South Cooperation Center formalized an institutional arrangement and functions as the national nodal point. Within this context, the South-South Cooperation Cell interacts with development cooperation agencies from other countries. South-South Cooperation Focal Point, the United Nations systems, and especially the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperations. In 2016, Access to Information, the Bangladesh Mission of the United Nations, and UNOSSC invited several countries to a high-level side event on the sidelines of the 71st UNGA. At the side event, His Excellency Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, supported by the UNDP administrator, called for the establishment of a South-South network for public service innovations for those countries willing to participate. The network was formally launched in collaboration with the UN Office of South-South Cooperation and UNDP at last year's Global South-South Development Expo in Atlanta, Turkey. In the space of just 1 year, the network has grown to contact 29 countries and already facilitated 52 matches to enable countries that have successfully tackled public service challenges to export solutions to countries that need them. As a result of this initiative, Ugandans will soon start benefit from a teaching factor concept designed in Singapore. Bhutan is exporting its tools and insights for improving public service delivery in Fiji, and Bangladesh SDG tracker is being imported by Peru. I am proud to share that the South-South Network for Public Service Innovation, or SSN for PSI, has launched its first publication in the South-South Matchmaker. With support from UN Office for South-South Cooperation, this publication showcases best practices emerging from across the network involving 29 countries. Policymakers and development practitioners seeking to understand better how South-South and triangular cooperation can contribute to the improvement of people's lives find this publication a useful resources. Bolstering Bangladesh's commitment to South-South cooperation, we increased our core contribution to UNOSSC 15 times from 17. The Buenos Aires Plan of Action, BAPA plus 40, to be held in 2019 represents an opportunity to enhance the current institutional arrangements to better support South-South cooperation. In this context, the South-South Network for Public Service Innovation promises to be a timely platform, particularly in the area of public service innovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rahman, for really this important insight on the experience of your country with South-South cooperation. We know that South-South cooperation is a priority in your international cooperation policies and with the involvement with the higher political leadership of your country, and also for sharing a very innovative experience with the public service innovation, and for sharing this experience with other countries that culminated with the creation of the South-South Network on Public Service Innovation. Thank you very much for this insight. Thank you. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Noel Gonzalez Segura of Mexico. Noel, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Tariq, and it's a pleasure, of course, to be with some very good friends, which we go back together a long time, and we have fought many battles together in order to actually foster this very important agenda of South-South cooperation and financing for development. Of course, we are Qatar and Mexico hosted two conferences on financing for development, and of course that is part of our global to our commitment to the global development agenda. Let me begin by sharing with you a little bit of information about the Mexican Agency for International Development Cooperation, AMEXID. It was established in 2011, 7 years ago, after the adoption of a law that was proposed at the Parliament, and which established our national framework for international development cooperation. We have the advantage of having a law, and that I think it should be underlined, because we have a legal mandate to do what we do. We know that in many countries, and we used to struggle to get information, to promote coordination, to ensure that the role of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the directorates dedicated to South-South cooperation, sometimes the coordination is a little bit difficult, but the law has been a very important instrument for us to ensure that coordination. The law establishes the obligation for AMEXID to have, or for Mexico to have, an international development cooperation program. So we have a strategic vision that is intended to last the same time that the current administration of Mexico is actually finishing today. So the current program is also finishing today. But we are in the midst of establishing a new administration, and of course we expect that we're going to have a new program with enhanced capabilities, and which takes into account everything that we have been learning for the past 7 years. We also have a national registry of development cooperation, and in that we are innovative because we talk a lot about quantification of South-South cooperation. Well, we have a methodology. We know and we understand that South-South cooperation, it is indeed different from North-South cooperation in the sense that we, for instance, do not have ODA as such. We don't have a budget that is dedicated to development cooperation, but we share technical cooperation with others. We share the solutions that we have found in Mexico, and so many of our development in the international cooperation cooperants, the persons that do the cooperation, are Mexican public officials that actually work in the topics nationally wise, and they take a little bit of their time to go abroad and share. And we have a methodology to quantify that collaboration that I'll talk a little bit later as well. We have also a consultative council, because we understand that development cooperation in Mexico, as I was saying, AMEXID is a coordinating agency, but the implementation is undertaken by 17 or 18 ministries from the federal administration in health, in transportation, in infrastructure, in financing. So all the Mexican government, in a sense, is embedded and is also undertaking development cooperation actions. Our priority, of course, because of the region we live in, is mostly Central America and the Caribbean, where we work in issues such as food security, climate change, adaptation and mitigation. We work on resilience, we work on health, education, infrastructure, and we understand that by doing these actions, we actually help ourselves. This is what in the academia is known as enlightened self-interest. Of course, if we combat epidemics in the south of Mexico but not in Central America, then it makes absolutely no sense, because mosquitoes with malaria do not stop at the border, right? So we need to work along with our neighbors in order to overcome our common challenges. But we know also that there are these challenges to the global community, like climate change, security, unsafe migration, and international development cooperation is also a way to tackle these global common challenges and create opportunities through the building of stronger economies and more stable societies in our region. Mexico, from 2013 until 2017, according to our methodology for accounting development cooperation, provided development cooperation, South-South cooperation, so not ODA, unlike other countries we don't account as ODA our development cooperation, for around $1.16 billion, which is modest in comparison with other donors, but for us it is a good demonstration of our commitment to this kind of development cooperation. We work then with Central America, with Latin America mostly, and we have some innovative mechanisms such as joint funds that we have established with countries like Uruguay, Chile, Spain, and Germany in order to, in a horizontal manner, tackle common challenges. Those are very important instruments for us. And very briefly, I would like to refer as well to the Buenos Aires conference and its preparation. We have been thinking a little bit of what we expect or what to expect from the conference in Buenos Aires, and there are basically 4 points that I would like to share with you. The first is that we believe that South-South cooperation is a means of implementation of the 2030 Development Agenda. It is a means of implementation along with other means of implementation and with other financing for development flows like investment, trade, etc., but which has a very specific role. It is not a substitute, of course, of North-South cooperation, but we don't think that South-South cooperation only complements North-South cooperation. We think that in any case, all types of cooperation complement each other. And we believe that South-South cooperation has a very specific and unique role to play, and that we think that the conference in Buenos Aires needs to foster this role of South-South cooperation in the global development architecture framework, along with North-South, triangular, and other financing for development flows. We also are aware that South-South cooperation, even if it hasn't changed in its nature during the last decades, it has certainly changed in its dimension. It has increased widely. It reaches now, of course, billions of dollars. So it needs to be well managed because it comes, of course, from the taxpayers' money in developing countries. So we need to ensure that it is well planned, it is well implemented, it has impact, it is monitored and measured in order for us to be able to basically have a good management, as we have good management in all public policies nationally wise. South-South cooperation is not an exception. It has to have the same, let's say, rules for good management in order to help us explain to our own constituencies nationally why we do this and how does these actions benefit our own national populations. So we need to, in Buenos Aires, we think that we have an opportunity to share good practices and to establish processes or identify these tools for managing well our South-South cooperation. Then the third point is a word that can be sensitive, I believe, in the frame of the United Nations. We think it shouldn't, but it is effectiveness. We need to ensure the effectiveness of South-South cooperation. There are 4 principles of international development cooperation which we believe apply to South-South cooperation in its own unique way. It's not the same as in North-South cooperation, but South-South cooperation also is ruled by ownership of the beneficiaries, results-based planning, transparency and accountability, and inclusive partnerships. Of course, this idea of inclusive partnerships is very important, working with the private sector, the civil society, the academia. Local governments, for instance, are, in some cases, the ones that are responsible for the delivery of public services in many countries, and of course, involving them and training them and providing them with the tools of international development cooperation enhances their capabilities for doing their job. So we think in Buenos Aires this is another element that we should, of course, enhance. And the final point is that we need to promote the coherence between global agendas and the collaboration among international organizations. Of course, within the UN system, all the specialized agencies, funds, and programs do have within their mandates South-South cooperation. The United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation has a mandate which is system-wide in order to promote this coherence. We need to strengthen that mandate and we need to strengthen that coordination, but we need to go beyond the United Nations. The OECD, the Ibero-American Secretariat, the African Union, NEPAD, ASEAN, all these regional organizations have a unique mandates as well in their own regions, and we need to ensure that we all work together in order to tackle our common challenges. And of course, another role for the multilateral organizations is helping demand and supply of development cooperation meet. So what are the capabilities and what are the needs, and to be a platform for making people come together, join each other, and be able to advance all together in the implementation of the 2030 Development Agenda, and of course our common goal of overcoming poverty and promoting sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noel, for this really very rich presentation. Actually, there is a lot that you can share with other countries. You have highlighted the importance of the legal framework to better coordinate at the national level, but also how to develop cooperation with other countries. You have highlighted also the importance of methodologies to quantify some of the aspects of South-South cooperation. I think this is really important, and also the experience of the joint fund. And I'd like also to thank you for all the insight and the 4 points that you mentioned about the BAPA Plus 40 conference. Thank you very much for that. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Federico Bonaglia from OECD Development Center. Federico, please, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Gracias. It's a pleasure to be here and address such a distinguished, share the panel with such a distinguished group of friends and address this distinguished audience. Just a word of introduction before I focus on the 3 key messages that I would like to share with you today. I'm here representing the OECD Development Center, which is a bit of a special animal in the galaxy of international organizations, because we have a membership which is partly from the OECD. We are hosted by the OECD, but we have half of our membership that is made up of countries that are not from the OECD. We have countries from Africa, Egypt, Morocco, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Mauritius, countries from Asia like China, Thailand, India, Vietnam, and countries, of course, from Latin America and Central America, from Panama to Costa Rica, of course, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Repubblica Dominicana, and others. And this is done by design. It was when President John Fitzgerald Kennedy had the idea of creating the Development Center in 1962, he wanted to have a table where the North and the South can get together to discuss about policies for development. We have a very broad mandate that is not sectoral, is not specific on financing or on any specific policy. We have a mandate to promote a dialogue on policies for development. So when I have to explain to my mother what do we do, I say, well, we work with many countries and on many topics. It seems silly, but it's a bit different from having a very focused area or only working with certain countries. So against this background, I think that it's great to be in this forum and being able to discuss about how to promote exchanges around policies to advance the SDGs. And I would like to begin by quoting here the Vice Minister from Egypt, that in his opening remarks the other day, alongside the Secretary General of the United Nations, was saying that South-South cooperation leads to more diverse opportunities for advancing the SDGs. And I hope that I didn't misquote, but I think that we should start from this point. What are we talking about? We're talking about policies, cooperation policies, to advance the SDGs. This is our common reference framework, and we shouldn't forget that we're all here to advance this important task. I will also start by quoting a date, 2008. Why was 2008 an important year? Of course, our friend here from Qatar would say because the Doha Conference on Financing for Development took place. That's certainly true. But it was also the year when the South share in global GDP passed 50%. So in 2008, countries from the South started to account for more than 50% of global GDP in PPP terms. And this is a phenomenon that has been brewing for many years and is continuing, and which has led to greater convergence of developing countries toward OECD countries in terms of GDP per capita. So this is good news. There has been a process that we call shifting wealth, and this process has been driven by South-South linkages, investment, trade, including cooperation. Of course, large emerging economies have been at the center of this process, but many other countries have played a very important role in this. Now, why am I making this long introduction? Because I think that we should place the discussion about institutionalizing South-South or triangular, or let's call it horizontal forms of cooperation into the bigger picture of why it matters. And these are my three key messages that I would like to share. The urgency, the need, why we need to do it, the gaps, is there anything that we need to fill? And third, how can we do it, the proposal? And for number 2 and number 3, I could almost entirely share my talking points with Noel because we say almost the same things. So why is important to advance horizontal cooperation? Because the process that I was describing of convergence of developing countries is unfortunately slowing down. It is continuing, but the process of economic convergence over the last few years has been slowing down. And if we look at the economic and sustainable development results of this process, certainly there has been an increase in per capita GDP, certainly there has been a reduction in extreme poverty, but if we look at multidimensional development, we have a bit more of a mixed picture. And even countries that have reached lower middle income or higher middle income status continue to face very significant vulnerability and structural challenges. Just a bit of self-promotion, we just launched yesterday the Perspective on Global Development 2019. This is an attempt to look at the process of shifting wealth, not only in terms of income, but in terms of multidimensional well-being. And if you have time to have a look, you will see that there is no clear correlation between increases in per capita GDP and improvements in a wide range of well-being dimensions. So this is something that should be our reference point. So if it is necessary now to address these problems, what is the role of horizontal cooperation, be it South-South or other forms? Well, we believe that this is more urgent than ever because every country around are looking for solutions to address the structural vulnerabilities that are, to some extent, hampering the growth process to deliver development. So we have increases in GDP, but we are not reduction in inequalities. We have not improvements in the environment. We have not improvements in skills. And the challenges that we're going to face, just think about the future of work, we require new type of solutions, new type of skills, new type of educations. So it's more urgent than ever to have international cooperation, to have a functioning multilateral system. In this respect, I fully share what has been said by the other panelists. South-South and horizontal cooperations can and should play a very important role. But we believe that there are some gaps that need to be addressed. And this is where the institutionalization part, and this is my second message. It is urgent. Are there gaps that we need to fill? We believe that there are certain gaps that need to be filled. One important gap is how to better connect demand and supply. And this means how to articulate demand and link the offer of cooperation to the needs of countries. How can that be better embedded into national development strategies? We were discussing yesterday the excellent work of Segib that did a fantastic recollection of 10 years of projects. This is amazing. But when you look at it, you also see that in many cases projects have been piecemeal, responding to specific needs in a bit ad hoc fashion. They have not necessarily been addressing or placed into the national development strategy of countries. So we see one gap is how can South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, be aligned, as Noel was saying, to national development strategies. So this is a point of better structuring demand and supply responding to demand. Second, we believe that there is an issue of measurement, as Noel was saying. We need to have a better understanding of how big and where the cooperation is going. And here there are important initiatives like the GPI that the OECD is also supporting with others. I think that this is an agenda that should continue. There should be more investment into that to understand the trends, the sectors, but also the simplification, the administrative simplification, the reduction of transaction costs. Then there is a third gap that I think is the one where we as Development Center can help working with other organizations here in the UN or regionally, which is the connection of platforms. How can we develop platforms to discuss about policies and the content of South-South cooperation? And here I come to my last point, which is the proposal. What can we do and what we will be very pleased to see in the BAPA plus 40 outcome document, if possible. We believe, as Noel was saying, that the BAPA should have a strong recognition of the importance of international cooperation for sustainable development. There should be an unequivocal message that we need international cooperation, rule-based multilateral system, inclusive and transparent now more than ever, because the challenges that we face are unprecedented. So strong recognition of the importance of cooperation in general. In this respect, recognizing the specificities of each form of cooperation, also stressing the complementarities and synergies of those, and ensuring that this can respond to national priorities for development. And here, two concrete examples that could be put on the table are advancing the measurement agenda, and the second one is advancing the content, the policy connection agenda, which is platforms where countries at different levels of development can discuss shared challenges, be it challenges of natural resource dependent economies, be it social vulnerability challenges, be it challenges of production transformation. And in this respect, we believe that the Office of the United Nations in charge of South-South should play an important role. And as Noel was saying, in connecting and in connection with the many regional and international organizations that are working on this topic. I'm sorry, Chair, if I spoke a bit too much, but it's an exciting topic, and I thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you very much, Federico, for this really important presentation, and you have given us the important insight on the mandate and the role of OECD Development Center in bringing together different groups of countries in order to discuss, is a platform of discussion and exchange about development policies and policies for development, and also for the three messages. And I see a lot of convergences among all the panelists on so many important aspects, including the importance of filling the institutional gap, the issue of the impact, the connecting the platforms, and also for the need for and strengthened and of international multilateral cooperation system for the achievement of the 2030 agenda. Thank you very much for all these messages. So these discussions that we and presentation we heard from our distinguished panelists were really tremendously enlightening. And I have to say that I would like now to open it to the floor, and I have to say that I'm doubly lucky, because I'm lucky first because I am surrounded by friends here in the podium, and also I have also very distinguished discussant. I don't know if the representative of Lao People's Democratic Republic is in the room. They ask for the floor. Otherwise, I'd like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Kuwait Fund for the Arab Economic Development. So please, you have the floor, and I will appreciate if you can just introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, panelists, distinguished guests. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. The state of Kuwait, a developing country itself, established at the end of 1961, the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development as an institution for development cooperation with other countries in the Arab region. Later in mid-74, the fund's mandate was expanded to include all developing countries. Activities of Kuwait Fund long-standing institutional cooperation with its developing country partners included the provision of the concessional loans to finance priority development projects, technical assistance to finance required consultant services, special expert services, and capacity building. In addition, the fund has been entrusted with the administration and supervision of the Grand Extended Directory by State of Kuwait government to a number of development countries. To date, 106 development countries across the globe have received official development assistance, ODA, from the fund, including 16 Arab countries, 42 African countries, and 48 other countries in Central Asia and Europe, East South Asia and the Pacific, and in Latin America and the Caribbean, with a total amount equivalent to about 21 billion US dollars to finance about 965 development operations covering such sectors as agriculture, transport, energy, water and sanitation, communication, health and education, as well as other. An amount of technical assistance equivalent to about 890 million US dollars has been extended to a number of development countries and institutions to finance activities as already indicated. In addition, the fund administrated grant extended by the government to development countries and institutions amounting to about equivalent 1.6 billion US dollars to finance various humanitarian services, including health, education, housing, as well as other activities alleviated poverty, promote food security, and empower the beneficiaries to help themselves. In delivering its development assistance to development countries, the fund adopted flexible policies and procedures underpinned by ownership of recipient countries to their own development and reception to their development priorities. However, projects supported by finance from the fund undergo through evaluation by fund staff experts to verify their technical soundness. South-South cooperation is an important complement to North-South cooperation in the context of a global development landscape comprised of all stakeholders, including triangle cooperation. In this context, coordination among development providers is a critical element in streamlining policies and procedures and mobilizing resources required for sustainable development. The United Nations adopted in September 2015 the 230 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its associated 17 goals and 169 target, achieving these goals at the national, regional, global levels, and pledging that no one is left behind. Call for the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development as underlined by Goal 17, which is the thread that waves all SDGs together. In this regard, all forms of cooperation are needed to tackle the challenges confronting the realization of the optimus SDGs. Kuwait Fund supported its development countries' department in the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, and has pledged support to SDGs. Making progress toward the SDGs requires, among others, adapted resources from various domestic and foreign sources, especially ODA, for low-income and less developed countries, designing strategic consistent with the SDGs, recognizing the interrelated aspect of the SDGs, sequence and timing the implementation of the SDGs, promoting capacity building and supporting South-South and Triangle cooperation in the implementation of activities and projects leading to the realization of the SDGs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, the representative of the Kuwait Fund, for sharing with us this important insight on your activities in the Arab region and beyond, and also in different areas of cooperation. Thank you very much for these insights. So we still have almost 20 minutes to go. We'll be happy to hear your views, your ideas about this important topic, which will be, we think, at the heart of the consultations toward BAPA Plus 40 conference. So please, just if you can.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Grace from Nigeria. I'd like to express my delegation appreciation to the organizers, the OECD, JICA, and the Islamic Development Bank for inviting us to this very distinguished event today. Indeed, it is the 10th anniversary of the DG Forum on South-South Cooperation with the theme, Scaling of South-South Cooperation for Meeting SDGs. The theme in itself is indeed a very laudable one, and the forum has indeed brought us together, great leaders for cooperation agencies of national government, the opportunity to exchange views on South-South approaches and methodologies with a view to strengthening our partnership. The Technical Aid Corps Scheme of Nigeria was established by the federal government of Nigeria in 1987 as an alternative to direct financial aid to Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific countries by sharing Nigerians' expertise through the deployment of Nigeria professionals to recipient countries. Deployment is based on the assessed and perceived human resource needs of the recipient countries. Since its inception, the scheme has continued to serve as an instrument of mutual cooperation and understanding between Nigeria and the recipient countries. As an indigenous development initiative, it continues to impact the sustainable social economic development of recipient countries through the recurrent investment of human resources. It has also served to enhance South-South cooperation. It is imperative for better institutionalization of South-South cooperation is imperative for better coordination and harmony. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank the UNOSSC for the impact recorded on South-South cooperation through its policies and operation. Indeed, the UNOSS has provided adequate leadership guide and direction on South-South cooperation. The recent SDG have also recognized the increasing role of South-South cooperation in facilitating their attainment. Today, we're talking about the BAPA Plus 40. Nigeria has these ideas and input that can make for a better proceeding. BAPA Plus 40 is the 40th anniversary of the Declaration of South-South Cooperation. It is indeed an opportunity meant to undertake stock-taking of the 40 years of South-South cooperation, experiences, lessons learned, lessons shared, and the way forward to South-South and triangular cooperation. For South-South cooperation and South-South triangular cooperation to thrive, meeting Goal 17 of the UN SDGs is paramount. We call on development partners, development architects, development entities to partner, collaborate, cooperate force to address Goal 16, peace and security, and consolidating institutions for development. Of course, we believe in the TOAST process. Member States possesses a reservoir of knowledge, expertise, and experiences that, if well tapped, through sustained partnership, will strengthen socio-economic development among them. We should seize the opportunity of the Islamic Development Bank Refers Linkage initiative to strengthen connectivity, partnership for economic development. Indeed, the Directorate of Technical Aid Corps and the Islamic Development Bank are working on modalities to collaborate for the treatment of obstetric fistula in the Gambia and Sierra Leone. This falls under the 3-2-C initiative of the reverse linkage approach of the bank. The IDB and the DTAC celebrated the 2018 edition of the International Day of South-South Cooperation on 12 September 2018. It is to be recalled that in 1978, the United Nations General Assembly adopted this process. We believe that technical cooperation among South-South states must be deepened based on comparative advantage and must hinge on fundamental principles of peace building, capacity development, and sustainable development. In addition to achieve a sustained technical cooperation in the Southern Hemisphere, there must be regular interface, such as this forum, to monitor, coordinate, and evaluate the implementation of South-South cooperation. That is, peer review mechanism must be put in place. We call for the need for information sharing through varied convenient means, such as websites and exchange of information between relevant agencies, as well as participation in relevant international forums like this to exploit available technical cooperation opportunities. Finally, the South-South community must own, co-own, and be responsible to its technical cooperation processes, initiatives, and mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the representative of Nigeria, for sharing the experience of your country and highlighting important messages, including the need for an institutional arrangement and also the peer review mechanism, because we know that in Africa this is a unique experience with the IPRM. And thank you very much for highlighting that. So I will appreciate the colleagues if they can be short and concise, so we'll have a chance to the panelists also to respond to your remarks. So the colleague over there.
Sí, buenos días.
Good morning. I'm Andrea Vignoni. I'm the Executive Director of the Uruguay Cooperation Agency. I think some concepts are important to mention. International South-South cooperation and South-South cooperation is recently hierarchical. That is, in fact, if we read the report that was presented yesterday, I think that is as of 2010 to date that we concentrate most events where we actually talk about South-South cooperation. Why do I say this? Because we believe today we are living a very special moment before BAPA plus 40, and this is an opportunity to also organize this way of cooperation, which allows us to support ourselves in sustainable development in view of solidarity, mutual respect, and results. We believe South-South cooperation will really allow us and help us meet the 2030 agenda with a multi-dimensional view of development, as Federico was saying, that it's not only rent per capita. That does not necessarily take us to sustainable development. We need to find new modalities to complement each other. And once again, South-South complements other modes of cooperations, and triangular cooperation is the same. And some important aspects that we should mention. Uruguay has been developing South-South cooperation. We have a fund for this, and institutionality is important. I think multilateralism should support this so that all countries can have the possibility of include cooperation, to have institutions that could manage it efficiently, because we need for these not to just be governmental or central institutions. We need to strengthen national systems of cooperation, because those who cooperate are really sectors and ministries, local governments, civil society, academy. And so we need to strengthen the system in our country so we can have efficient South-South cooperation. Also accountability. Accounting and measuring. We have digital system, and our experience has been essential to create consensus and generate platforms that allow us to have transparency and accountability so we can show people the effect of South-South cooperation. Multilateral system should support us so that we can have other platforms in other countries so we can have this matching between demand and supply.
Representative of Uruguay for these important messages and highlighting the importance of South-South cooperation for the achievement of 2030 agenda and also the principles of South-South cooperation. So we have the colleague over there. Please, you have the floor.
Okay, muchas gracias. Bernardino Neto.
Thank you very much. I'm Bernardino Neto from Angola. Angola would like to thank you for the organizers for inviting us to these forums and to promote a common development focus. I have a question for Dr. Julius Muya from Kenya. Most of the money that is received for development aid returns to the original countries on behalf of consultants or administrative expenses and operational expenses. Some say this is debt assistance. So what is Kenya's experience in terms of managing the money that comes from international donors and partners? Thank you very much.
Representative of Angola for the question. Thank you. So, yes, the representative of APRM. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Moderator Tariq. And our gratitude to the Office of the UN South-South Cooperation. I just want to share with you 2 minutes of our experiences in South-South Cooperation from the African perspective. And basically emanating from President Obasanjo and President Mbeki's ideal to persuade Africa to create its own solutions using South-South modalities. And I just want to share with you how the African peer review mechanism has come to be one of the exemplary models of South-South cooperation as we speak today. It was established 15 years ago by the African Union under the auspices of NEPAD, and we've been mentioning NEPAD quite a bit in passing. But it was established 15 years ago, and right now it is an official organ of the African Union institution. The basic tenets of the African peer review mechanism is to foster an element of ownership in decisions that pertain to governance on the African continent. It's also to make sure that experiences and best practices are shared amongst the African countries who are members of the African peer review mechanism, but also to act as an early warning system for impending crises and conflicts going forward. We also want to look at how we can foster amongst ourselves democratic governance, economic governance, corporate governance, and management of natural resources on the African continent. As we know, Africa is pretty much well endowed, but it's also one of those continents which still goes out with a bowl full of gold to ask for assistance from the outside world. Currently, there's 37 members that have acceded to the African peer review mechanism. The first 21 reviews have been done, and as we speak right now, as of yesterday, Botswana also agreed to become a member of the peer review process. And the core guiding principles of this review process for all governance issues as contained in the Declaration on Democracy, Political, Economic, and Corporate Governance is that every aspect of review has to be independent of political and government interference. So we are protected in that way. And what happens after each review is that we create a national program of action which then enforces or empowers the country to actually integrate those recommendations into national development plans, and those plans can then be implemented as a country, at the country level. And I'm glad to say Kenya is a very active member. Nigeria is also quite active in the review processes. We are now expanded to include monitoring of specific aspects of the SDG program and 2030 agenda, specifically on governance, that is SDG 16, but also on the African continent, we are also entrusted in monitoring progress on the African Union Agenda 2063, Aspirations 3 and 4, which actually are very congruent to the SDG Agenda 16. Currently, we've expanded the role of the African peer review process to include other aspects on top, over and above the review processes, to include, say, monitoring areas of interest such as illicit financial flows coming out of the continent, looking at the rating agencies and how they impact investment climates in our societies and countries. We're also looking at monitoring and measuring aspects of governance. We have, of course, a number of strategic partners, including the OECD, UNDP, the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, the Economic Commission for Africa, the African Capacity Building Foundation, to name a few. But we'll be talking more about the African peer review as we go in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative of APRM, for this insight about this exemplary model for peer review at the in the African region. So I think this is time to come back to our panelists. I will start with Dr. Muya because there was a question for you. I will appreciate if you can give some feedback on the question.
Well, thank you, moderator. The question that was asked directly to me was from Angola, and the question is how Kenya is managing funds from donors. And the answer, actually, for us is that we've got a framework of development called Vision 2030, which is our long-term government development framework, and all support from development partners in whatever sort have to fit into our development planning framework. Such that when development partners are coming in to support Kenya, then the design, the structure of their support and the programming must be within the goals, must be within the programs, must be within the activities that Kenya has already designed. And for that matter, we also make sure that we subject the activities that are going to be supported with that funding through our public sector performance management system, where we track and monitor through a very elaborate performance management contracting system what is being done in the public sector. And that helps because we also have a very elaborate monitoring and evaluation system that sits in the State Department for Planning, where I'm the Principal Secretary. Of course, we also look and manage the absorption rate to make sure that we don't have also funds that have been committed and then we are not absorbing them. And so I think the trick is to make sure that the funds that are coming in are not driven by an outside agenda, but it is the country itself which is determining what kind of money it needs and then determining how that money is going to be applied for development. But moderator, if you can allow me just to say a few things, that through actually our discussions, one thing that I see coming through is the need for us to create a network of innovative knowledge sharing, such that we don't have pockets of lack of knowledge when there is good knowledge elsewhere and it's not being put into good use. And that could be something that we can enhance as we think about BAPA plus 40, because again, we have the advantage of technology, and therefore we should be able to leverage on that technology to share knowledge more widely and in better depth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muya, for your feedback, and also for just to echo what you have said at the end of your presentation now, that even the office is in the process of developing a global database for knowledge sharing, and this is a really important element to be highlighted. Just I'd like to give the floor to our distinguished panelists for a short last message if that you'd like to offer on this important topic. I don't know if Mr. Rahman, do you have any? Thank you very much. Federico?
Well, thank you very much. Just reiterating that you can count on us and that we really believe that the discussion should continue and evolve toward the content of the horizontal cooperation and how to better structure demand and supply to address the priorities of national development strategies.
Thank you very much, Federico. Noel?
Thank you. Just very briefly, I think that the conference in Buenos Aires and, of course, this platform provides us with the tools and the ideas that we need to improve what we do. The purpose of us all is to be better at the implementation of the 2030 Development Agenda, to be better at the implementation of national development strategies, and of course, through knowledge sharing, through exchanging experiences, through sharing platforms. And I would like to underline that this should be done across regions. The importance and the richness that was put on the table by the representatives of both Nigeria and the African Union is exemplify very well how can we learn from each other. And just a brief comment on the question of the gentleman from Angola over there. I think he's right. The accounting mechanisms for ODA come from the perspective of donors. They are the ones accounting, and whatever they assign to a certain country or region is what is accounted, even though if it's not spent in that particular region or country. We think that we need to improve, of course, the way that we quantify all of this financing for development flows, and that is why it is so important to construct and to build domestic national systems for accounting South-South, but also development cooperation in a broader sense, and we think that Buenos Aires can also provide us with that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Noel, for these important messages. Tarek?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would just briefly say that BAPA plus 40 is coming, and there will be tough negotiations on the outcome. And I would like to just stress the importance of believing in that we are living in a global town, and having this conference with the title of South-South doesn't mean that it only belongs to the nation of the South, and then the nation of the North and the South will create a track of difficult negotiations. I believe that we are living in a global town, and if you go to, for example, Nairobi outcome, it talked about the common interest of all nations, not only the South countries. It talked about the South-South cooperation, also North-South cooperation. So I think we need to look at the conference and its preparation and discussing the outcome in a very constructive manner. This is very important because it's going to be useful for the international community as a whole, and it will be important to take stock for the pending recommendations that were not implemented. And in this regard, I think the South-South Cooperation and Office will have an important role and engagement with the presidency of the high-level committee on South-South cooperation, and from the other hand also the G77 group with its presidency and the coming presidency as well, with also the office or secretariat of G77 here in the United Nations. There will be importance for coordinating all the efforts between all these institutions, since we are talking about institutionalization, with the partners, with the North countries as well. So good luck, and see you in Argentina. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tarek, for this feedback. And I must say, this was a very enlightening session. We have heard tremendously important insight and ideas on how to move forward the South-South cooperation agenda. I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists for these really rich discussions, and also for the representative from the floor who also provided important insight. So we have come to the end of this session, and I'd like to invite you to give a round of applause to our distinguished panelists, please. Thank you very much. We'll be moving to the second session about reporting, and I'd like to invite the moderator and the panelists to come to the podium. Thank you very much.
Thanks to the moderator.
Good job.